Are we there yet? Almost, sweetie. At the back of the car sat a kid so tiny her white cloche hat only just peeked over the back of her seat. With every bounce of the suspension, her head lurched like it was only loosely bound to her neck. Then every once in a while she would vanish from view, only to bob right back up again. Finally, the car stopped. The little girl rushed out of the car and followed her family around the colorful and lively amusement park. "So many humans," she exclaimed while looking around happily. The father of the girl, who was carrying her brother in his arms, chuckled. "People. You should use the word people, sweetheart. People. It's human beings in general, but it's more appropriate to use. A popoyit." This time it was his son who asked, his big adorable eyes looking at him in confusion. The father of the child smiled helplessly as he temporarily gave up on the idea of further explaining the word to his children. He brought the kids to the amusement park to have fun, not to teach them. "You should leave your lesson for later, Honorable," the woman beside him said, chuckling. "Yeah, I think I should." And so, the parents showed their children around. They began trying every ride that was for young children to enjoy. The last ride they took was the Ferris wheel. While they were inside the carriage, the fireworks display began, and it shortly filled the sky with colors. The sparklers were like flowers in the sky that mesmerized the kids. Every child loved shimmering things. "Look, Mama, it's so pretty," the girl exclaimed happily from the glass window. "Pretty," followed the younger boy beside her. "Mama, let's come back here on my birthday, okay? Eh? Here again. Why don't we go somewhere else instead? Like the zoo?" Shoo? While the mother was busy explaining what a zoo was to the children, their ride shortly came to an end. Their father stood up from the seat and was about to step out of the carriage, but the next thing that happened surprised everyone. He fainted in front of them. The sight of his body falling on the ground was in slow motion in the eyes of the little girl. Everyone who saw him lose consciousness had their eyes open wide in surprise. "Sisi!" The mother rushed to her husband's side. She shook his body and kept calling his name, but he didn't wake up no matter how much she shouted. Help! Someone! Call!" The children, on the other hand, were confused at what was happening. They were too young to understand the situation. The girl went to her father's side and gently shook his body with her tiny hands. "It's not time to sleep yet. We are not at home." "Why is Papa sleeping here?" "Papa." She should have realized it back then. If she did, she wouldn't have made things harder for her father. She wouldn't have forced him to go out with her. Instead, she would have taken care of him at home with her mother and brother. A strong breeze blew against the little girl, making her close her eyes for a moment. "Happy birthday, Mong. Ching ching." The girl opened her eyes, and this time, her family was in the middle of the zoo with other guests. There were a few children around as well who happened to be their cousins. "Gigi, big sis, quick, let's blow a candle," Meng's younger brother Ching Ching exclaimed, his eyes sparkling so brightly while drooling at the cake in front of him. "Don't forget to make a wish first," their mother reminded them. "What are you going to wish?" the girl asked her brother. "Toish." His sister pouted, then shook her head in an adorable manner. "We have so many toish, Ching Ching." "Everyone is waiting, Meng Ching Ching," their mother said, chuckling as she watched the two kids think of a wish. "We're getting hungry," one of their cousins complained. "Then wait more. Making a wish is not easy." Ching Ching nodded at what his sister said in agreement, even if he already made up his mind on wishing for more toys. "Gigi is right." Meng turned to her father, who was now sitting in a wheelchair. He has been staying at the hospital for weeks, and to be able to see him attend her combined birthday celebrations with her brother meant more than anything for her. She looked at her brother and leaned, whispering something in his ear. The younger boy didn't understand most of it, but he just nodded a few times as if he did. "Okay. Okay, we're ready. Bring it on," she shouted, looking as if she was going to fight someone, which made the grown-ups laugh. Meng and Ching Ching wish that Papa will become wealthy again so that Papa can play with Ush. When everyone heard the wish that the children made, especially the adults, the smiles on their faces became stiff. Everyone knew that it was an impossible wish, everyone but the children. She should have prayed harder for that wish to come true. She should be praying every day for her father to get well. After celebrating their birthday, while they were on their way back to the hospital for their father's treatment. "The gifts I have for Meng and Ching Ching are at home," the man's gentle voice was heard, which made the little girl wake up since she has always been a light sleeper. Meng remained still in her position with her eyes closed. pretending to be fast asleep, just like her brother. She somehow wanted to eavesdrop on her parents' conversation. "You should have brought it with us earlier." With a soft chuckle, the father replied, "You can't blame me if I forgot." A sigh coming from her mother was heard. "You should get some sleep. We still have time before we reach the hospital. I will wake you up once we arrive." It became quiet for a few seconds. Meng Meng wanted to peek at her parents, but before she could even open her eyes, a soft reply coming from her father was heard. "Li Bingbing, I love you." "I love you too, Cici." The little girl who was listening to their conversation tried to suppress the smile that was trying to escape her lips. Oh, how she wanted to open her mouth and exclaim, "Meng Meng loves Mama and Papa too," but she was pretending to sleep, so that has to wait. She shouldn't have waited. She should have just gone on with it. She should have told them how much she loved them. She should have told her papa before he went to sleep forever. Upon arriving at the hospital, Meng Meng, who fell asleep after eavesdropping, was woken up by her mother. After successfully stirring them awake, Li Bingbing turned to her husband to wake him up next. "Cici, we're here." But there was no response coming from him. It was then she noticed that the man who looked like he was sleeping was no longer breathing. Realizing this, her body was instantly filled with fear. "Cici? Sinian? Papa must be in a deep sleep," Meng Meng said, yawning after. "Papa, wakey wakey." Qin Qing reached out and began shaking his arm. "No, no." Their mother kept on mumbling. She snapped her head to the driver and shouted, "Call the doctors!" "Now, call them. Time of death, 11:46 p.m., the doctor announced. What are you saying?" "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am." The woman fell on her knees while looking at them with eyes filled with tears. Her breathing became ragged, and her tears wouldn't stop flowing from her cheeks. "Mama, what's wrong? Please don't cry. Don't CCWI." The mother was already informed by the doctor that her husband had limited time left, but as days passed, he remained awake. Small hope grew in her. Maybe he was getting better, but instead of getting better, it was more like he was holding on just to spend his children's birthdays for the last time. She was told that she should prepare herself, but how could she do that? She was never going to be ready for the day her husband leaves her. Them. As the woman continued to cry, the clueless children ended up crying together with her. Their mother was sobbing hard, and it was only normal for children to copy their parents even if they didn't know what was happening around them. The day when their father left, he took their mother's heart with him. "Why is Papa in a big box?" Meng Meng asked, as she watched the coffin being placed down in the hole that was dug earlier. "It is your father's ride to heaven," said the man who was standing beside her and holding her hand. The little boy who was standing beside his sister blinked a few times in confusion. "Papa, weaving?" Meng Meng's eyes became teary. "Why is Papa going to heaven?" "Papa can't leave us." She pulled her hand back and rushed towards the pit for the coffin. "Papa, wake up!" "Don't weave." But before she could try and jump down, she was pulled back from the hole. Arms were wrapped around her, trying to keep her still. The child's eyes were glazed with a glossy layer of tears. "Papa, no, no weave," Qin Qing shouted, and tried to follow his sister, but this time, he was stopped by the same man that held the girl's hand earlier. Li Bingbing, who was hugging her daughter from behind, tightened her embrace. Her lower lip quivered as words slowly made their way out of her mouth. "Meng Meng, it's okay that Papa will visit us sometimes." She refused to release the child who was trying to squirm her way out of her hold. "Sweetie, it's okay. It's okay." Suddenly, everything went dark, and in the middle of this darkness, a woman in her 20s was seen. She was hugging her knees, and her shoulders trembled as she cried. "Don't leave. Papa, don't leave. Please don't leave. I'll be a good girl, so please don't leave." A television suddenly appeared in front of the woman. It turned on, giving light to the pitch-black room. "Is it on?" A familiar, gentle voice was heard. Meng Meng lifted her head upon hearing the voice she has always yearned of hearing again. "Happy birthday, Meng Meng." The man on the screen was looking at her with warmth in his eyes. "I missed you." Her lips trembled as she looked at him. "Papa, I want to go to you. How old are you now?" "Ah, you must have grown up to be as beautiful as your mother, I wish I can see how pretty you've become. I bet Qin Qing is as handsome as me now, huh?" Ah, this was another one of his recordings. Her father left 16 recordings for her and her brother. It was the birthday gift he was talking about back then. He has prepared everything before he died. Even in this video recording, he looked so thin and weak. He was wearing a bonnet to cover his bald head. If she remembered correctly, this was the last recording she watched on her 16th birthday. Even if he was not her real father, he spoiled and showered her with love. Even if she was the daughter of another man, he has always treated her as his own. She was held captive by nostalgic memories, wailing at the cruelty of this world. She thought that by succumbing to grief, she would no longer feel pain, but at that moment, she was reminded of the person who held a part of her heart. "Ah, my children are really growing," he smiled from the television screen. "I know that there may be times where you both feel alone sailing on those uncharted seas. I know that there may be times when you both have been calling for help in every way possible, but that is how life works. Life is always unfair. That's reality." She lowered her head as she continued to listen to the recording, the same words that comforted her years ago. He has always given words of wisdom in every video he recorded. They were the same words that comforted her during her sad days. What you have to remember is that you will never be alone. I never left. I'll always be by your side. Even if the whole world will turn against you, my children, I will always be your ally. I'll make sure to be the star that guides you both in the dark. I am always watching over you. Never forget this. As soon as the recording ended, the television disappeared. The girl panicked when the room became dark again. Her only source of light was gone, and now she felt like a blind person because of the darkness around her. "Papa! Papa!" She stood up and began looking around. "Please don't leave me again." This time, the man's figure appeared in front of her, glowing. In that dark, cold room, the light coming from him was enough to make her feel safe and warm. He reached out and gently cupped her cheek. This warmth. She never thought that she would be able to feel his warmth again after all these years. It felt so real. In the darkest days, when you feel inadequate, unloved, and unworthy, remember whose daughter you are and straighten your crown. I want to see you grow more and more, so live, Mingji. You can't come here yet. Suddenly, the light coming from him grew and covered the entire room, blinding her and forcefully making her eyes shut. Her slender fingers slightly twitched as her eyes moved under her closed lids. Shortly, her long, dark lashes fluttered as she slowly squinted them open. Her eyes were black, not soulless nor lifeless. Instead, they were like two pristine stones of onyx. Instead of feeling like she woke up from a dream she couldn't remember, she felt more like she just emerged from deep waters. The woman seen in the middle of the bed has hair as black as coal, which contrasted against her pale complexion. As her eyes adjusted from the light in the place, she found herself in an unfamiliar room. Where? She wondered groggily. She could hear a computerized beep coming from the side of her bed, and when she turned her gaze to look at the origin of the sound, she saw a heart rate monitor with the lines continuously going up and down and was in sync with the mechanical sound. Hospital. She must be at the hospital, right? You're awake. An old man's voice caught her attention. Her bandaged head slowly turned, her eyes landing on the two unfamiliar men standing by the door. One was a bald man in a suit, while the other was an elder. Huh? Who are they? The old man's head was filled with gray hair that looked almost like silver. His wrinkled face was filled with relief, but at the same time with urgency. He looked at the man beside him. Hurry! Call the doctor. Just as the old man ordered, the bald man left the room to call the doctor in a hurry. Child, you're awake. The elder was about to approach her, but as he did, at that moment, what caught her attention again was the next person who entered the room. The man has a face that stopped any person on their tracks. He was handsome and yet intimidating. The man that approached them was a clear head higher than most people she would consider tall. Somehow, he wasn't lanky though. There's bulk on him too, muscles beneath the tailored suit he was wearing. Sexy. His long legs moved slowly as he was still walking towards them. Grandfather, we need to go back. Let the doctors handle her. The man's icy voice sent shivers in her body. How can a voice be this deep? The elder ignored the man who addressed him as grandfather. His gentle gaze was still locked at her. Child, how are you feeling? She opened her mouth to say something, but only a groan escaped because of how dry her throat was. She felt so bleary that it was taking a bit of time for her body to adjust. The old man turned and took a glass, filling it with water. He went back to her and handed the glass to the man standing on the side. Hold this. he said with much authority that the younger man could only eye him in protest as he quietly obeyed without complaining. My name is Bai Karan. This man here is my grandson, Bai Jingye, he introduced while adjusting her bed. The slight incline was enough to restore the force of gravity on her body, straightening out the spine. Bai Karan? Bai Jingye? Such unfamiliar names. Bai Karan took the glass back and offered it to the woman on the bed. Since her muscles were weak and stiff, he helped her by gently placing the side of the glass on her lips and carefully making her take a sip from it. Just before she could ask another question after drinking, the door was flung open again as the doctor and a nurse came in. They were followed by the same bald man that the old man ordered just a minute ago. My name is Dr. Sao. Don't worry, you're in the hospital, the doctor reassured as he went and stood beside the old man. Hospital. That was obvious enough with all the medical instruments inside the room. Yes, you were unconscious for almost 2 months. Do you remember what happened? A small knit appeared between her brows as she looked at him in confusion. Unconscious for 2 months? How? Why can't she remember anything? The doctor noticed a disturbance in the patient's eyes which alerted him. He took out his ballpoint pen and showed it to her. Do you know what this is? She drew her eyes towards the item before he returned them to the doctor. Pen. Yes. How about this? He tapped on his wristwatch. Why was he asking her such question? She was not an idiot. Watch. Then do you remember your name? He asked. She opened her mouth and was about to say her name, but only a word popped out in her mind. Meng, Meng. May I know what is the last thing you remembered before you got hurt? She tried to think again, but her mind remained blank. Nothing. She wanted to ask what was happening to her. Why can't she remember anything, but her voice wouldn't come out so easily? Her body, particularly her throat, needed time to adjust after being unused for more than a month. Do you remember anything else about yourself? Meng Meng tried to think of anything about herself, but her mind was blank as a clean sheet of paper. She began to inwardly panic when she realized that she could not even remember anything else about herself. Anything? Places? Friends? Families? She could only shake her head a bit as a reply. She turned her anxious gaze to him. The old man turned to the doctor in worry. What's wrong? Finally, someone asking with the same question she had in mind. The doctor sighed before explaining, it's normal for her to forget since she has a head injury. She went through a brain surgery, so the momentary shock must have caused her to forget. Her being in a coma is also a factor that causes her temporary amnesia. Amnesia. Hearing that it was only temporary, she couldn't help but inwardly sigh in relief. She still has a chance to remember who she was. Now, another question entered her mind. What was her relation to this old man and to that handsome man who was quietly standing behind him? The elder was relieved when he heard what the doctor said. That's good. That's good. The doctor stared at the woman on the bed for a few seconds before he turned to look at Bai Karan. Mr. Bai, can I have a word with you outside? Bai Karan noticed something else from the doctor. Could it be what he said earlier was not everything? All right. He turned to his grandson and gave him a warning glare. Don't make things uncomfortable for her. With that, the old man followed the doctor outside. It seems like she is in a fugue state right now, the doctor said. Fugue state? The old man looked at him in confusion. I can't say for sure right now. She will need to be observed for days. But as of now, she can't remember any of her past life. There are a few rare cases of being in a fugue state. It is a condition where some patients forget everything about their life after suffering from a head injury, explained the doctor. Are you saying something's wrong with her brain? He asked worriedly. Not exactly. They are usually people without brain dysfunction. It's sometimes because they're running away from something that is too painful to experience, he further explained. That was the only thing he could think of considering his patient's situation. He was already expecting that she would lose some of her memory considering that her head was injured. She could either have a few confusion or would end up getting her memories mixed up, but not totally losing it. Her head injury shouldn't cause her to forget everything about herself. The old man became quiet as he cupped his chin with his finger. This situation should be advantageous for him. He once again turned to the doctor and asked, how long will it be before her memories will return? You said that it's temporary. Knowing when her memories will return is something I cannot say. He only said that it was temporary in front of the patient since he has already noticed her distress. Especially now that she is in a fugue state. It can be days, weeks, months, or even years, although it will be helpful for her if she is surrounded by people she knew. Having things that belong to her should be helpful in gaining her memories back. It was quiet in the room. Bai Jingye didn't speak a word ever since his grandfather left him with the patient. The woman on the bed felt uncomfortable as well, but she didn't dare to open her mouth at him. He was giving a "don't talk to me" vibe around him. Well, it's not like she can make a full conversation with the condition she was currently in. Not long, the old man finally came back with the doctor following behind him. Bai Karen sat on the same chair that he sat at earlier. "Child, are you sure that you don't remember anything about yourself or your past?" the old man asked, looking so worried for her and at the same time, desolate. Meng Meng paused and tried to remember anything, but her mind remained blank. She ended up slowly nodding at his question. She was on the verge of crying. She was a woman with no memory of anything. She was clueless and filled with confusion. It was chaos in her head. She did not know where she was. How did she get into an accident? What to do? Where to go? She felt so frustrated. Read latest chapters at Enovo Binkoam. Her hand unconsciously landed on her chest as if it was already a normal reflex of her body to want to hold something to help her. Calmed down, but found nothing. She only felt the bareness of her neck. Necklace. Was she wearing a necklace back then? Did she lose it when she saved the old man? Do I have anything that belonged to me? The bald man took a quick glance at the old man before answering, "We found your bag at the scene, but it was all bee-burned, including its contents. How about a necklace, perhaps?" The man shook his head and continued, "Nothing. There was no necklace. Maybe it was just her imagination? Maybe there was no necklace?" Bai Karen held her other hand with both hands this time. "You don't have to worry, child. I was with you when the accident happened. I know who you are." "You know me?" A glint of hope flashed in her eyes. "Yes, you are my grandson's fiancée, Bai Mengshi. I'm so heartbroken that you can't remember anything about us, your family." Mengmeng's eyes widened in surprise, although what was shocking enough was that everyone in the room was looking at the old man in disbelief. "Grandfather." Bai Jingye was interrupted by the elder as he continued, "Let me help you remember, okay? I adopted you when you were 10. You were close with my grandsons until you fell in love with one of them. The day after your engagement with Jingyi here, we got into an accident," he said carefully, as if trying to make her remember. "Do you remember?" She tried to remember, but nothing. "It's too much to take in right now, but don't worry. We should focus on your health first. I bet you will remember some of your memories once you spend time with us." The old man's eyes were filled with warmth and kindness that she wasn't even able to see through him. Was he telling the truth? She didn't know. Only her memory can serve as proof. What caught her attention was the gratefulness in his face. She was like a blank canvas that anyone could easily paint whatever they wanted on her. On the other hand, the man who stood beside the old man had his eyes darkened as he clenched his fists behind him. Luckily, the woman on the bed didn't notice it because of the old man in front. "Gee, Grandpa, don't worry, child, I'm here. I will help you remember everything." Meng Meng remained at the hospital for 3 more days and was discharged shortly after the results of the additional tests were out. Except for her head injury, there was nothing else wrong with her body. Her injuries were already healed during the time she was in a coma. "I hope you can get your memories back and remember this place," said Bai Karan as he led her out of the car. She stepped out from the black car, gaping at the large mansion that sat beyond her, towering over her as if attempting to intimidate her. The cream coating of the paint shined as the sun beat down on it, causing the girl to have to squint. It was large and elegant in design. The woodwork on the outside was filled with frills and embellishments which suggested many woodcarvers working overtime for ages. Upon entering the house, the light streaming in through the large windows added brightness and bliss to the atmosphere. Well-trained servants lined up and greeted them in unison. Wow, it looked like she hit a jackpot. To be an adoptive daughter of a rich old man, how lucky. "Father," a woman coming from the living room was stomping her way towards them. "Is it true? You engaged my soul?" She came to a stop the moment her eyes landed on Meng Meng. The question she was about to ask was already answered. The girl unconsciously shrunk away from the angry-looking woman. She moved to hide behind the only man she trusted in that place, Bai Kairan. Father, he's my son. We can talk about this later. The old man didn't look bothered by her outbursts. Instead, he looked at Bai Jingye and ordered, escort her to her room. Despite wanting to protest further, Bai Jingye's mother kept her mouth shut in the presence of the old man. It only showed how much authority he has in the place. Everyone obeyed him, despite their feelings. Meng Meng was shortly led by her fiancé to the grand stairway to the second floor near the formal entrance. It was strange the man who was introduced to her as her fiancé was indifferent to her, but at the same time, it was what attracted her more to him. Bai Jingye had a blank look on his handsome face the whole time when Bai Kairan introduced him to her. He has an aloof and mysterious air around him. She could not read him at all. She could only wonder what was going in his mind. This will be your room from now on, he finally spoke after he opened the door's room for her. She faced him and couldn't help but stare at his stoic face. He even looked better than the actors and models she saw on the television. A blush spread on her cheeks when his sharp eyes landed on her. Her heart became uneasy when she was stared at by such an attractive man. Grandpa said that, "You're my fiancé." Meng Meng started. She was like a child who easily got enticed by sparkling things, and right at that moment, she has that look in her eyes. It was hard to begin a conversation with him, but she still tried. The man remained unaffected by her. He was already used to women with great beauty falling for him at first sight. What he couldn't understand at that moment was the reason why his grandfather suddenly decided on insisting on letting him marry her. He could have easily said no if that old man wasn't blackmailing him. But just because he agreed to marry her didn't mean that he wasn't going to make things hard for her. Hearing no response from him only made things awkward for Meng Meng. She lowered her head and stared at her hands as she fiddled with her fingers. They were childhood friends. Shouldn't they be at least on good terms? Didn't Grandpa Bai tell her that they were in a relationship? Then why was he acting so apathetic? Shouldn't he be treating her kindly? Whenever he visited her at the hospital, his treatment of her was always the same. Indifferent and cold. I lost my memories. So? He raised a brow at her, looking at her with a callous gaze. Am I supposed to pity you? This man. Was he really her lover? Even if she lost her memories, it didn't mean that she became dumb. Something was not right no matter how attracted she was to the man in front of her. Aren't you supposed to be my lover? She questioned with slight hesitation. Confusion was evident in her eyes. Lover? He scoffed at the word. This engagement may be arranged by grandfather, but it doesn't mean that I will automatically be your lover. Ah, now she understood. He was forced to be here. No wonder he looked so surprised back then when the old man introduced him as her fiancé. It was an arranged marriage. An arrangement that she has no knowledge of. Or maybe she had. She really didn't know with her head empty of the memories of her past. Even if that's the case, she stammered. She gazed at him for a few seconds hesitantly. This beautiful man in front of her should at least treat her kindly even if they were not lovers. Aren't we supposed to be childhood friends? Bai Jingye stared down at her in contempt. Even if he didn't say a word, she could see how much he belittled her. He turned and left her there without saying anything else. Read latest chapters at Novelle Binko. The iciness and the suffocating atmosphere coming from him disappeared, making her finally gasp for air. She didn't realize that she was actually holding her breath when she had the staring contest with him. What should she do? She has nothing. Did she do something wrong to him before the accident took her memories? Has she sinned against him? Was that the reason he always looked mad? Well, now that she knew where her room was, it should be all right to look around, right? But the thought of meeting her mother-in-law made her change her mind. What if she got lost in this huge place? Even most of the servants eyed her with disdain so they might ignore her instead of helping her if she got lost. She finally looked at the room and was surprised at the grandeur of it. Thick velvet curtains hung in front of the windows. A gilt wardrobe stood next to the beautiful canopied bed. That's rich people for you. Wherever her eyes landed, it always spelled expensive. Flaunting their money was their specialty even without saying a word. She should go back downstairs. She needed to learn the truth from Bai Kairan. She wanted to check if there are photos or any kind of evidence that proved her connection with the family. If she asked him, maybe he would have no choice but to tell the truth about her relationship with his grandson. But father, How can you let someone like her, a peasant? Why did you allow her to enter this house? Upon hearing the loud voice of a woman coming from downstairs, Meng Meng hurriedly hid at the corner of the stairs. They were talking about her, right? No one else was new in the manor but her, so it was easy to guess that. Even if she saved you, you can't just give my son's hand in marriage. This is too much. From the corner, Meng Meng saw the frosty glare that the old man was aiming at the woman complaining at him. My decision is final. The iciness of the voice sent chills in her body. A sudden fear entered Meng Meng's body when she heard the change in the old man's voice. He sounded so different. Was he really the same gentle and kind old man who accepted her in this family? He looked like he changed into another person. Just, what has she gotten into? Doubts began to fill her mind, but at the same time, she didn't have a choice but to trust the old man. He was the only person who was thinking of her. He never treated her badly. During her stay at the hospital, he was fun and easy to get along with whenever he visited her. She was his adoptive granddaughter. Adoptive. The woman said that she saved him. Could it be possible that he was repaying her for saving his life? He was protecting her right now. The only reason why his mother didn't lash out at her was because of the old man's presence. She only needed to continue getting on the elder's good side just so she could have his protection. The poor girl was clueless about her background, and in the end, all she could do was trust the only person who was kind to her, Bai Karan. She gave up on the idea of finding a proof of her connection to their family. Somewhere in her mind, she thought that it was better not to know. During her stay at the old man's place, she was easily getting along with him, acting like his filial granddaughter. She never complained about being engaged to his grandson since she liked him, despite how indifferent he was to her. At the same time, her wedding was being prepared in the same week. Her help was unnecessary, so they never included her in the preparation of the wedding, nor did they ask about her opinions. At first, she found it strange, but at the same time, she couldn't complain. She shouldn't, especially when she has already received so much kindness from Bai Karan. A week after, the only time Meng Meng was able to see her fiancé again was on the day of their wedding day, and it was during that day that she ended up falling in love with him at first sight. Again. Seeing the man in a white suit was enough to captivate her heart. He was the most handsome man she has ever laid her eyes on. She ended up confusing her superficial adoration into love. He may have no love in his eyes, but at that moment, she was confident that she could make him turn her way. The wedding ceremony didn't take long. It wasn't grand either. The only guests were the old man, his trusted right hand, and Bai Jingye's father and brother. Even if she was trying to turn a blind eye, she couldn't help but wonder. They were the only guests. No friends considering how rich the family was. Her wedding was small with only a few family members present. Strange. Really strange. This was the first time meeting the other members of the family since the old man has prohibited them from visiting his manor. It was only normal for Bai Jingye's mother not to attend when she was so against the marriage. She was an adoptive child of the old man. She could understand the reason why they were unfriendly. She was not a real member of their family. She had no work, no background that can benefit them. She was only a girl that had been spoiled by the old man. The urge to back out from the wedding was strong. Her instincts were telling her that if she continued, she would regret it. It would be too late. Bai Mengxi, do you take Bai Jingye as your husband? She felt like a sheep offered in a platter for the wolf to devour her. You can't marry him, her instincts shouted at her. You don't even love him. She stuttered. She turned her gaze at him, but the moment her eyes landed on his brown orbs, she never felt so enchanted that she ended up blurting out, I do. Idiot. He may be hot and sexy, but you don't love him. Take back your words. Something inside her felt so against her decision, but despite the indifferent look in her groom's eyes, she couldn't help but be absorbed into it as if she was being pulled into a black hole. It's all right. We can learn to love each other later in our marriage, she thought, as a smile formed on her lips. After the ceremony, no one congratulated them except for Bai Karan. You are now officially part of the Bai family. Congratulations, dear child. Thank you, Grandpa. She smiled sweetly at him and even gave him a hug. Jingyi, you better treat your wife well, okay? The old man said after pulling away from the hug. Yes. It was a cold answer. Meng Meng tried to suppress another smile when she heard his answer. She couldn't help but be filled with hope inside. Even if they didn't marry each other out of love, she was sure that they would learn to love each other in the future. The bald man approached the old man and announced while holding a phone, "Mr. Bai, you have a call." Bai Karen excused himself from the couple to answer the call. Just like Bai Jingye, the others were indifferent to her, especially his father. He didn't hide his hostility against her. He left without even congratulating them. On the other hand, his elder brother was different. "Welcome to the family, sister-in-law." Bai Zichen approached her with a big grin plastered on his lips. Like his brother, he was tall and has a nice build. His dyed blonde hair stood out in the room. His friendly features and his playful yet charming smile made him look more approachable than his brother. "Thank you." Meng Meng trailed off with a shy smile. He was such an eye candy. If only her new husband was as welcoming as him. Now that she thought of it, Bai Zichen's bright and kind personality resembled his grandfather. Bai Karen in his younger years should look like him since they look like each other so much. "Congratulations, brother." He finally turned to look at his younger brother. Bai Jingye's eyes narrowed as he glared at his brother, which only made the other man smirked. "This is why I told you to always be obedient and listen to the old fox from the start. Now look at what you have gotten yourself into. You ended up marrying a dumb bitch." "What?" Meng Meng looked at him in shock and disbelief. Did she hear things right? Did he just call her dumb? Did he just insult her? Her brother-in-law turned to her and smiled sardonically. "I guess the only thing she has right now is a pretty face." This man. He was not being friendly at all, and here she thought that he was different. She clenched her fists tightly as she tried her best to calm down. "Don't punch him. He may be an ass, but he was still her brother-in-law. It was her wedding day. She was not going to allow him to spoil her mood. Ignore him for now. Be patient." Bai Zichen waited for her to erupt, just so he could make matters worse for her, but surprisingly, all he received was a glare. He scoffed. "Looks like this whore is not that dumb at all, but still looks brainless." He turned back to Bai Jingye and sadly said, "I feel sorry for you, brother. I wish you good luck in dealing with a ludicrous gold digger." A strange glint of light flashed in her eyes. The side of her lips curled up and a small laugh escaped her lips as she retorted, "You're as funny as a blind toddler in a shitty minefield, brother-in-law." She crossed her arms and smirked, her innocent face turning into something devious. "If you're going to be a smartass, first you have to be smart, otherwise you're just an ass. Your anus must be jealous with the amount of shit that comes out of your mouth." Both the brothers turned her way, startled when they heard her response. Meng Meng realized the words that unconsciously came out of her mouth. She covered her lips with her hand and blushed embarrassedly. What has suddenly gotten into her? Bai Zichen was about to say something but was interrupted when the old man came back. "Huh? Why are you all still standing here?" "Ah, I was just trying to know more about my sister-in-law, Grandpa." The older brother glanced at Meng Meng, which made her unconsciously shrink back at the sudden goosebump she felt. She moved a bit to the side, just to hide a bit behind her husband. The old man didn't seem to notice the sudden change in the bride since he was not looking at her. "You can do that later. We should head to the restaurant I reserved. You all must be starving." "I would like to join, but sadly, I have a business meeting to attend. I am a busy man after all," said the older brother. He turned to the bride and grinned. "I'll see you next time, sis. I look forward to knowing you better." Ugh, it would be better if she never saw him again. After having dinner, they were dropped off at a luxury hotel that Bai Karen prepared for the newlywed couple. It was the place where he wanted them to spend the wedding night. It was weird to have the old man prepare everything, but not a word of complaint was heard from either of the two. The only pajamas Meng Meng saw in the room that was prepared for her was a beautiful see-through nightdress. She had to quickly hide it earlier from her husband out of embarrassment. She locked herself in the bathroom. "Ugh, is this even considered a dress?" she mumbled to herself while staring at the clothing, her face in its darkest shade of red. It was a wedding night. Newly-wedded couples normally have sex, so it was only normal to wear something like this just to set the mood, right? She was aware of her beauty. She has an appearance of gentle intelligence. No one could stand above her in beauty, at least that was what she thought. She hasn't met someone prettier than her. She was so confident enough to the point she sounded narcissistic. Meng Meng stared at her own reflection. her long ebony black hair falling softly around her waist and framing her perfect heart-shaped face, the contrast making her skin seem as pale as the moon. Snow White. Their features were perfectly matched. She would always catch the eyes of the men in the room. She never failed to notice how the male servants would steal glances at her as she walked into a room, but for that same reason, the female servants considered her a vixen. Strangely enough, she wasn't able to captivate Bai Jingye. If she wore such a seductive nightdress, would he finally want her? The only possible reason for him not to was either he preferred men or he already has someone he loves, but either way, he was now her husband, and Meng Meng was going to make him fall for her. She went out of the bathroom and saw the man who was now her husband sitting at the side of the bed. His attention was not bestowed to her since he seemed to be distracted by the document he was holding. How should she address him? She has never seen him for the past few days. He was probably avoiding her, but he won't be able to resist her now. She carefully approached him and stood in front of him. She was feeling embarrassed with the dress she was wearing, but it was the only nightwear that was prepared for her. As if finally noticing her presence, Bai Jingye slowly raised his head to look at her, only to be caught off guard by how close she was standing to him. The intoxicating scent coming from her entered his nostrils, which slowly reached his brain. There were no other clothes. She stammered as she covered her chest shyly with her arms. I'm sorry. Sorry. What was she sorry for? For wearing such an alluring dress. Bibi Bai Jingye. He was snapped out from his trance when he heard her melodic voice say his name. He knitted his brows together into a deep frown the moment he realized what just happened. He squinted at her through hardened eyes. Every muscle on his face was tense. The sudden change in the atmosphere made Meng Meng flinch. She suddenly felt suffocated by the pressure in the room. This was not the kind of atmosphere she was looking forward to. She unconsciously backed off. What was he suddenly so angry about? The man in front of her stood up, his voice ice cold as he said, "Sign this." He reached out the document to her. "Sign?" She turned to the document he was reaching forward to her. "Don't just look at it." Once again, she flinched at the tone of his voice, which made her unconsciously accept the file in a rush. Her restless eyes fell on the paper, and the moment she read a word in it, she shot her head back at him in disbelief. Divorce? How can he ask her for divorce when they just got married? "Not right now. I will submit that a year after our marriage, a year. But I want you to sign this right now," he continued. "If you're worried about what you will receive, you don't have to. 2 million. You'll receive 2 million alimony as long as you promise not to show yourself in front of me after our divorce." How could he? Why can't she have this man? Why was he so against it? They looked so perfect with each other, and she was sure that things would work out just fine for them if they tried to work things out. She was willing to discuss terms with him, but by signing the document, it only meant that he was never going to give their relationship a chance. He was never going to try to love her. He was never going to try anything. She looked at the file once again and ended up staring at his signature. Even his signature was beautiful. Each stroke was neatly written. Sign it. She didn't want to. Once again, her subconsciousness opposed her heart. A part of her was willing to sign the papers. A part of her was glad that he offered something like this. Read latest chapters at Inavobinko. She sat on the side of the bed and took the pen that was on top of the drawer. "Do you have someone else you love?" she asked, wanting to get straight to the point. That was only the reason she could think of. There was no other plausible excuse. Yes, this should only be the reason why he was so against their marriage in the first place. "I do," he answered straightforwardly. He stood up and walked away from her. He clearly didn't want to stand close to her or even give her another glance. There was no hesitation in his voice. There really must be someone, and he really must love her. He was treating her like she was a disgusting person, and it only made her feel awful. She didn't want to be with a guy who would treat her badly like this. "What is her name?" she asked as she uncapped the pen. This time, she was able to make him look at her again. He raised a brow. "Why should I tell you? I at least deserves to know the name of the woman who has your heart. Don't you think so?" She raised her head. The look in her eyes changed just like how it did when she retorted at his brother. The woman who looked like an anxious rabbit earlier was now looking at him with strange calmness in her eyes. For some reason, Bai Jingye couldn't help but feel that something dangerous was sleeping inside her. The way she talked to his brother was a hint. This woman. Just who was she? What was her real temperament? Xian Rui. Her name is Xian Rui. It was just a mention of the other woman's name, but Meng Meng could see how his eyes softened upon saying the woman's name. Ah, how unfair. So he can manage to even give that kind of look, huh? She felt a small pang in her chest when she realized that she never stood a chance. Maybe it was better to end their relationship early while her feelings weren't strong enough for him. Maybe it was better to start putting distance. There was no use in trying to get something she can't have. It would only put her in an early demise. 3 months. You can submit this after 3 months instead, she said crisply, if gloomily. She tore her gaze at him. Her hand trembled a bit as she hesitated on signing the papers. Very well. The earlier the better, the man replied, somehow relieved that she offered a shorter term. She bit her lower lip as she tried her best not to cry about something like this, but she couldn't help but feel lost at that moment. Even after 2 weeks had already passed, her memories were not coming back. Didn't the doctor say that it was just temporary? So why was it taking so long? After signing, Meng Meng stood up and placed the papers on the coffee table. Bai Jingye, I was never your childhood friend, am I? She suddenly asked, her head hanging low. Grandpa never adopted me, right? Bai Karen probably lied to her since she saved his life. It was easy to piece things together, especially after how she saw how everyone treated her as a stranger. I guess you're not stupid after all, he replied coldly, but with a hint of amusement in his voice. Did they really think that she became foolish just because she lost her memories? She scoffed at the thought. I may have an amnesia, but that doesn't mean my IQ went down, she mumbled to herself, a pout forming on her lips. We will be leaving for Japan tomorrow, he said, changing the topic. Tomorrow. She was going to another country to live with him there tomorrow. Why did she feel like they were trying to hide her by rushing things? Why did it feel like they were running away from something? Grandfather's men might be wandering outside, so I cannot leave the room. I'll sleep on the sofa. Oka. She paused and instantly covered her mouth as she suddenly felt her stomach lurched. She rushed back to the bathroom to throw up the food she ate earlier. On the other hand, Bai Jingye was surprised upon seeing her that way that he ended up following her from behind. What's wrong? He frowned as he looked at her. I don't feel well. I think I ate too much ear. She threw up inside the bowl again. She was paler than a sheet of paper and lathered in sweat. She never felt so nauseous ever since she woke up. She heaved and heaved until there was nothing but an empty pit in her gut. Bai Jingye sighed at the sight and didn't have a choice to get a cup of water and offered it to her, which she gladly took. But that even forced its way up. The toilet bowl was filled with the food she ate earlier, but this time it smelled sour. The man's frown went deep, so he reached out and pressed a button on the side of the wall to flush everything away. Have you been feeling nauseous lately? She raised her head to him in surprise. How did you know? The man didn't answer, and instead, he left the bathroom to go back to the sofa. He took the phone that was on the coffee table and tapped on the screen. No matter how it looked, Bai Jingye couldn't help but doubt that everything was all right. She was a woman with an unknown background. With her memories gone, who knows what she has gotten into during the days before she lost them. For all he cared, she could already be a married woman. This was why he was so against marrying her. 3 months. He just has to tolerate this woman for 3 months. For now, he needed to find out if she really was pregnant. He messaged his assistant and ordered him to buy something. Meng Meng went out of the restroom, and this time, she wore the bathrobe to cover her body. She was wobbling a bit as she walked towards the bed. Her body felt so weak. Though she has somehow got used to the feeling ever since she was discharged from the hospital, she was feeling unwell, nauseous. She just thought that it might just be because of what happened to her. During her stay in Bai Karen's place, she kept quiet about her condition. It has only been 2 weeks since she left the hospital. Maybe she was still recovering from whatever internal injury she suffered from the accident? Shortly after, a knock was heard. Bai Jingye walked and opened the door only to see his assistant carrying 2 paper bags with clothes inside. Be early tomorrow. Yes, sir. He shut the door and turned to look at the woman who was gazing weakly at him. He sighed inwardly. So much trouble. Here, change into this, he said, as he went and handed her one of the paper bags, to which she accepted. Meng Meng was relieved to see the comfortable clothes inside, but what caught her attention next was the 2 small rectangular packages on the side. She pulled it out just to check, but her eyes widened in surprise after seeing what it was. "Eh? What is this for?" Meng Meng asked, slowly raising her head to him. "Can't you read?" He frowned at her. He was clearly annoyed by the innocent look on her face. It only made him feel soft and he hated it. What I mean is," she stuttered and paused to look at the box again. "I can't be pregnant, right?" she added, less sure. "We won't know until you use that kit." Meng Meng stared at the 2 lines that appeared on the kit. This was the second time she tried the test. Pregnant. She was pregnant. How could that be? She was said to be Bai Jingye's fiancé, right? Could he be the father? But their marriage was just an arrangement. Her husband has someone else he loved. Could she be seeing another man before she got into an accident then? She went out of the restroom with her face as white as a sheet. She staggered, her knees losing their strength. She was lucky enough to be caught by Bai Jingye, who happened to be standing outside, waiting for her to come out. I'm pregnant," she stuttered. "I am not the father," he said coldly, dissipating one of her doubts. He didn't want her to think that there could be something between them before she lost her memories. "I know," she mumbled. If he was the father, he would at least change the way he treated her and change his mind about the divorce. To be honest, she didn't know what to feel. Should she be happy or should she be depressed? With her memories gone, finding out the father of the child was nearly impossible. Reluctantly, Meng Meng decided to ask him the truth about their relationship this time. "Please be honest. Am I really your fiancé before the accident happened?" Being his childhood friend and being his fiancé were different matters after all. Bai Jingye didn't think twice in answering her as he straightforwardly replied, "No, you weren't. You're only a stranger who saved my grandfather, that's all. But Grandpa said you shouldn't believe everything he told you." She was a total stranger, huh? Not his childhood friend or his fiancé. She didn't have a connection with him from the beginning. The man supporting her was kind enough to lead her to the bed, allowing her to sit on the side of the bed. He was not going to comfort her just because she was this troubled. He didn't care. He turned and went back to the sofa. "We need to get some rest. We need to be early tomorrow to pack our things at home," he said coldly. How can she sleep after learning that she was pregnant, after learning that she has 0 connections with his family? The old man lied about everything. Strangely enough, she wasn't angry about it. He probably did that to repay her. He was only trying to help her, right? All her identity cards, even her phone, any information about her were burnt in the accident. With no money, no background, she would definitely become a beggar and starve. Please don't let anyone know about this, especially Bai Karan. She was afraid that he might feel betrayed if he found out. Seconds ticked by, but no answer came from the man who was now lying down the sofa. He won't tell anyone about it, after all they just got married. If others were to know, it would be an insult to him. At least that was what she thought. She unconsciously placed her hand on her stomach. She needed to have her memories back, but how? The doctor said that if she spent her time around the people she knew, if she has some items that belonged to her, then perhaps her memories would return. The only problem was, she was not familiar with the people around her. They were all strangers. That must be the only reason why even after a week of stay in the old man Bai's place, she regained nothing. It was a long night for Meng Meng. A lot of things were going on in her mind. She was anxious, confused, stressed. She was only able to fall asleep when her eyes grew tired. The next day, Bai Jingye dropped his wife at his place. She was quiet the whole time and never said a word to him while they were on their way. He didn't try to start a conversation either. The atmosphere around them was heavy. No matter how he looked at it, she was so bothered by her pregnancy. He couldn't do anything about her condition. There were more important things to do at that moment. Shortly after he dropped her, he ordered his servant to pack his things for him before he headed off to somewhere, leaving her alone.